see who Texas State Boobcat is. Unmute. Hello?
Luke, what's up, buddy?
No way.
How you
What the
doing, dude?
heck? I literally saw your username and was like, no way that that's my man. How are
Yeah,
you?
dude. How you doing?
I'm confused. But good.
So, a couple things. I mean, all right. First off, I I think it's hilarious how this Doug guy comes in here telling you what you can tell people to do,
Right.
but he gets to tell you. I mean, where do we separate, right? But
Yep.
I don't want to talk about what we disagree about because I think that that's many. But I want to kind of talk about what kind of things do you think, we can all kind of agree now? And like, what are some actions that you want to see, the right and the left kind of find a middle ground and start moving forward on?
Yeah. So for context, I know this person on the phone from the past, and so I already have a sense of his political views. And as he kind of alluded to, we definitely disagree. He would be more to the right than me, but we have very interesting political discussions. So to answer the question, in this climate, I don't know. One of the ways I think we can agree is to get away from anything that's social or cultural, because that's what I think gets a lot of the attention. It's the most provocative, and it's where we disagree as a as a country the most. And so getting down to economic issues, I think, is the only chance really we have to finding middle ground, and then some other policy things. So as far as like the current stuff, I saw your comment about gun control. I do think it looks like there's some movement in public opinion because of all the recent shootings. And I think definitely not everything that some lefty would want as far as gun control goes, but I think there's certain steps that could be taken that would get pretty broad consensus on the right and left.
I
Do you agree
couldn't
with that?
agree more. I think I think that's probably what we should probably center in on, just because I mean, I spend a lot of time hunting, right? And it's been a big part of my life. And so I've been around guns. And for me, after the Rob shooting, it was more so kind of a self analysis of, you know, first off, I think, in my opinion, I think video games are a big contributor to this, right? Because when I was in elementary school, this was not a concern at all, right? And at that time, people were playing on like a Sega Dreamcast. There was no good video games at all. And now we have entire tournaments around shooting at people and getting better and better at that. And so I'm concerned about that. I think that, as a society, we've kind of glorified violence. And I think that it's important to recognize that weapons are incredibly dangerous. And, I think what you're talking about with, we need to treat this more like a vehicle. I could be more on board with things like that after what we're seeing. I mean, we're in a pretty divided community now, and we have dangerous things in the public, right? And so, what are we going to do about that? And I think that I think if you're going to be out in public with a weapon, I think that it should have to be registered. And if you're found with an unregistered weapon, I think that there should be a very steep fine for that, because we can't have people just walking around willy nilly with weapons where it's unsafe for the public. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of people that are pro gun like myself that are ready to have this kind of a conversation. So I think another thing that Doug said earlier, why would you speak your opinion? I think that that's silly, because you know exactly why I watch your show, and
Mm-hmm.
it's because it can help me to better understand what people that side on your side think, right?
Right.
And I live in my own friend groups. I live in my own echo chambers, like we all do. And so that's why I like to expose myself to what you're talking about, because it gives me a balanced view of what's going on. So, I mean, what would you say on the gun control piece? Like, is one like concrete thing that you think needs to happen like now?
Ooh. Um, So first I'll say it's super smart and like thoughtful and well-rounded that you do that. I try. Sometimes it gets my blood boiling to watch what other sides are saying. The funny thing is the people that I know that are on the right in my personal life, I love talking to. So it's not hearing right-wing positions. It's the hosts that are popular, I guess, that strike me as dishonest. But as far as one thing, so as I laid out in my video covering the Robb Elementary shooting, which by the way, so many of those details have changed every single day. It's freaking me out. I keep wanting to do a video on it, and multiple timeline details keep changing and stuff like that. But one of the things I talked about was, as you mentioned, treating it like a driver's license, where you kind of have to be trained. And I saw you put in the chat, at least for ARs, you would have to have an extra amount of training. And I think that would make sense. One of the things that I was talking to a live streamer named Destiny on his stream was, the only concern is whenever it is a right in the Constitution, it's harder to put that many guardrails like we can do with a driver's license, where you have to do all of this before you can exercise that right. But I think just like how you have to register to vote, even though voting in my mind is definitely, I think we all agree, is definitely a right. You still have to go through some hoops to make sure that you're someone who should be voting. And I think the same thing for guns, where it's very accessible to the authorities who has which weapons. And then, like you said, if you're walking around with the wrong one that you shouldn't have, it can be taken away easily. But super quick that could pass in Congress, I think an age raise, my brain is fried, would be quick and easy, and I don't think would cause too much outrage. And then universal background checks. And then if there's any way, like you said, to just, because people do register their firearms, just not in certain sales. So
it's the private sales that get dangerous.
And so I feel like you could require that pretty easily and make it happen.
I'd agree. I would certainly agree. And I think the one thing I would say back, and something that I've had conversations with my friends recently, is, we're saying, oh, well, it's the two words you always hear is, it's a slippery slope, right? It's always a slippery slope. And the thing that I say whenever we say you can't infringe upon that right is, I mean, if they haven't infringed upon it at all, then why can't I just walk right into an academy today and buy whatever I want right now?
Mm-hmm.
There's already gun control. It's just, how far do we want to go with it, right? And I think that, it's a slippery, I will say it is a slippery slope when you start saying mental health checks. And, if you have any kind of like if you've ever had to take medication for things, it's like, oh, I don't get to have a weapon. That's not fair to a family, right? So I think that there is a lot of things to consider with when you're starting to say background checks, because background checks a very broad term, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you start creating positions in government that are dictating who gets access to weapons, it's probably going to be people in those roles that do not want people with weapons, right? And so, I mean, I wouldn't foresee a ton of people going to school, really passionate about a role like that were pro-gun. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just kind of been my read on that. But I don't know.
So I do have like some questions to kind of pick your brain about that perspective. Because for me, I do my absolute best. It's similar. An example is, in my personal life, I'm not that concerned with privacy. Like, the idea of someone watching me through my webcams and all that just doesn't bother me for some reason. But I understand, in principle, privacy for individuals is an important thing, even though I don't personally care about it. And so it's similar with guns, where like I don't personally care about guns, so I can't have that emotional knee-jerk reaction when someone gives me a potential where guns would be taken away from people. And so I am curious to hear from someone who does, and like guns, use guns, and have a more like deeper attachment to that right, kind of give your opinion. So where in your mind of the policy things that have been floated out there is like, that's clearly too far? Like, maybe the line's unclear right now, but where's, okay, that when people pitch this related to guns, that's definitely too far.
The biggest frustration for me is people that don't understand the use of certain calibers, the use of certain types of guns. I mean, you have the president of the United States talking about we need to ban 9 millimeters because they're dangerous weapon. That is standard issue to almost all cops. They use 9 millimeters and 45s. So
Hmm.
for him to come out and say that that's a dangerous weapon, but we need to be outfitting our cops with it because they need to protect us, that just doesn't make sense for people that agree with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so from an AR perspective, my belief is that, I think that you should have the right to protect your house. It's an effective weapon, right? But I think that, you should be able, you have to show proficiency with a weapon. You should have to show that you can load, unload, clean, put it away properly, handle it properly around humans, and not absolutely be a red flag. That's what I'm describing when I'm saying you should have to get some form of a license, right? I
Mm.
mean, but ARs do have a purpose. I mean, if you own a lot of property, I mean, we live in Texas, right? And there is some people that own thousands of acres. And do you want that land to just be tarnished by pigs? No. You're going to do something about it, right? And so I think that there are good reasons for weapons and there's bad reasons for weapons. Just like there's good reasons to buy an expensive car and there's reasons to buy an expensive car, right? I mean, they're dangerous. I mean, we see people driving into people all the time, right? Because they get this fancy car and they go incredibly fast and they hurt people because they're immature with it
Right.
and they're dangerous people. And so my belief is that we have a gun control issue, but what we really have is a gun man issue, and we've got a mental health issue here that we have to deal with, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
Clearly. Yeah.
it's getting to be a really sad spot where a lot of people are just feeling like there's not a lot of where the two sides going to get back together. Where's this going to go in a positive direction? And I think that it's having conversations like this, right, where it's we might not see eye to eye on every single thing, but we recognize that we can't just wait until the other party's in power, right?
Mm.
That's not ever going to move things forward. And
Yeah.
so,
Sorry.
go ahead.
It's just the weird thing is something about our political system so messed up because as you're seeing right now in this conversation, if you and I were, the phrase I like to use is co-dictators, and we had to come to some compromise, we could do it. It, like you said, we're not at the same point on the political spectrum, but we could definitely come up with some good things. Even though I want to get everything I want, you want to get everything you want. But it's so weird how that's just nearly impossible right now with our political climate. And part of it, I guess, is because it's perfectly popular for politicians to just obstruct the other party, I guess. Because you would think on an issue like this, and it looks like we might get something, but there would be an ability to, on the left, be like, hey, we're not going to get all those dream things with guns we want, but let's at least take the common sense things that even the right agrees with. But you just don't see it happen. And it's confusing in a time when we have, like you mentioned, all of these new developing issues like the mental health crisis, which I think largely, there's probably a few things, but one of the things that has to be contributing is social media. And, a piece of that, a lot of people hate whenever video games are brought up because the answer that I always hear is, you see all these other countries have the same games and they don't have violence. But I also agree from like a gut feeling perspective. It is hard to imagine that playing a game where you kill a bunch of people all the time doesn't at least partly desensitize you in some way. But I think for most people, it feels like a distraction from the more effective
Well, the
ways to
question that
prevent
I've
gun
been
violence.
asking my friends on that, because I mean, I grew up, I probably put in like a solid 24 days on Call of Duty 4, right? So that's aging myself a little bit, but I think I've been reflecting since the Rob one more so. Why did I like shooting at people so much on a TV screen? And how many
Right.
people have I killed on a TV screen? and then I turn around and I see these horrible things happen. And granted, it is in real life, and I can separate the two because I'm a sane human being. But why do I enjoy that? And so that's what I've been kind of pressing people about is why is, I don't know, let's say roughly 50% of our males playing video games where we're shooting at people constantly. That's
It's
just
really
it.
bizarre. Yeah.
It's a bizarre thought whenever, and I mean, I'm coming from, that's what I did. Like I was just like everybody. Like that's, and I played one of those games like probably 2 weeks ago. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So it's I'm not saying like I'm holier than thou. I'm just it's a strange thought, right?
Yeah, it's what that is that is so fun about it. Cause like I was never a huge video game player, but when I did play, it was super fun. Like, um, I'm not gonna name the games I play because who knows how dorky they are, but um, it is a fun activity, and I don't understand what that is psychologically that's exciting about killing people in a game. Um,
No,
but
I know,
then
right?
what you're saying about mental health, that's like thrown out a lot, and it feels clear to me that there's an issue, and I think most people see that. And we're even seeing super high depression rates like we haven't seen before, and I'm not hearing so many ideas on what investing in mental health looks like. And so some of the ones I pondered was I remember in high school, I don't know if it was the same for you, you engaged with a counselor so infrequently. And I think if you invested more in schools where they specifically to hire more counselors and hire more well-trained counselors who are like constantly engaging with the students, like you are forced to meet with them way more often. Like I had a few meetings I had to go to with counselors, but way more often, who are able to recognize issues a little bit earlier on that are mental health related. Because surely if you're shooting up a school, there were some mental health signs beforehand. Like you're not just a perfectly normal, steady, level-headed person, and some earlier signs, maybe you get some treatment or medicated or something. Um, and so I think that's one of the ideas. And then the other is just having a insurance plan by the government that, and this is where it gets tough. So I don't know what conservatives would propose for mental health investment, but
Well, I mean,
if
I'm
like
I'm
I'll
I'm
just
very
finish
much
this
more
just
so
super
like,
quickly, and then you'll be able to just respond
yeah,
to the
go
whole
ahead.
thought. Yeah. Uh, it like covering mental health with right now it's covered, I think, over Obamacare, like therapy, possibly, but then also if it was a universal system covering therapy, because right now therapy is insanely expensive. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I think I'm very much so a libertarian in the sense that I want as small of a government as possible. So when you're talking about, you know, more, what I believe in is we need to create more opportunity in this country for people. And I think that what we're seeing is a lot of financial stress causing a lot of emotional stress. And I think, yes, it's tied with social media and keeping up with the Joneses. And, you know, we're all trying to be, this superhero type person because that's what we see online. But I do think that we need to invest in getting more production in the United States because I mean they're dry docking boats from LA back to China because we don't have anything to send back. And so I think that this is as much of an emotional issue as it is an economic issue. And um, it's probably not the answer you expected, but I really think that we need to invest and something that's been on my mind here is, you know, I really want to get involved in getting a trade school going that's low cost
Yes.
because there's so much opportunity near, the port and all that where there's not enough welders, there's not enough drivers, there's not enough electricians. And these people can be making $100,000 in quick time. I mean, like 2 years. And to me, if you're making, that's enough money to take care of a family, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you have enough money to take care of your family, I think, odds are, let's say 75% of them, they're going to do right by their family. And so, maybe right now there's only 25% that can financially say that, right? So I do think it's as much, social media and, emotional issue as it is. These people just don't have enough income and they're stressed, and we're seeing them act up. And, you know, obviously the news, I mean, we watch two different channels, I'm sure, right? But if you watch, they're just trying to tell you how bad the other side is, not,
Yeah.
hey, here's what's going on, and here's why this is the right idea. It's here's what these other idiots think, and how crazy is that?
Right.
How effective is that to make us enjoy conversation like this? It's not, right?
I know when we were reviewing this Turning Point event, I paused during one of them and was just saying, isn't it fascinating that this entire speech has been against things and not laying out at all what the lady was for? And I think keeping that even in mind for myself, like, you can of course criticize opinions that you don't agree with, but then try as quickly as possible to turn it around to what you do believe in. Because I think like I believe statements are much more able to be processed and understood and empathized with than like attack style statements. And so I really want to, one of my big goals for like the next batch of videos is to try to bring things back to what I do believe and what I do want to like ideally enact in the country, so that people can remember I'm not just a political entity that has views because they're against, like, all my views aren't purely because it's against something else, which I think we've fallen into. And I agree, really any channel, I've stopped watching cable news because really any channel I turn on is just brutal to watch.
Yeah, it's super divisive, and I have my view of politics now is it's my job to speak on what I believe and use my megaphone to let other people hear it. And if other people believe that, that's great. If I'm wrong, I'm willing to be wrong, And I think that I'm not the smartest person in the world, right? But I think that if you have more than just you thinking that something's right, then keep going that way with what you think, and that's what I believe politics should be, right?
Mm.
And nowadays it's got to be this, it's got to be that. You're either a Trumper or you're left, and that's so frustrating for people like me that I believe in conservative beliefs, and I believe that Trump was ridiculous. I think that he had a lot of policies that I tended to agree with, fiscally and things like that. But that doesn't mean that I appreciate when he's, acting pompous. Nobody that's rational and conservative does.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't think there's a lot of people that are middle right that want Trump to run again. I don't think that. I think that we want some fresh, just something fresh, something that represents people that, can just have a positive interaction with people they disagree with, have, a go forward mentality. And I think politics right now is just way too controlled by lobbying and way too controlled by big banks, and it's scary, man. I mean, I think we're definitely heading towards a pretty tough recession here pretty quick, and it's going to be interesting to see, here in 2024 how we've recovered from this, and what does that really do for this election? It's going to be hectic, and
Yeah.
so I just I am hopeful that people find a way to find agreement rather than difference, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I don't know. And then after this, we can probably wrap it up. But I don't know if you caught my, at all, no worries if not, debate with that streamer Vosh. Did you see that?
No, I saw you talk with the dude the other day.
About the conversation?
Yeah, that was kind of strange.
Yeah, so pretty much just the debate was this pretty well-known live streamer, Vosh, was just calling Republicans like every name under the sun, which normal criticisms are fine, but he was saying like demons and human flesh and blah, 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 and like they want to kill all minorities and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
And
just like me, right? That's exactly
Exactly.
what I want to do.
Right. And so I went on his live stream and debated him, obviously. And the point that he tried to put on me as like what I was trying to say is like we should be super soft-handed and like not criticize stuff like that. And then also, which obviously wasn't I criticized a ton, but I think the other thing that was super dangerous that he was doing was saying like a genocide is about to happen, and he was very clearly saying the left should be prepping to like enact violence, and that was a huge issue I had. And so just to get kind of your sense of that, it's definitely a case, like the case. Even though polls do show like a lot of people believe stuff that the left would be considered to be pretty wacky, that there's lots of conservatives out there like you who are conservative on some fiscal stuff, maybe wouldn't be so down with Medicare for all, maybe is a little bit more socially conservative, but is not at all, but kind of has to deal with the wackier parts of the right.
Well, I mean, when you talk about turning point, I mean, me and my friends clown on those guys. I mean, that is just as much as you guys think that's a joke. People like me think those people are a joke. So I think that it's just frustrating how we have these like puppets running around on these stages, and it happens on the left too, right? There's super Looney Tune stuff on the left, but why do we isolate on these people that are clearly getting paid to act like buffoons whenever you and I can sit here and have a conversation like this, and there's conversations like this happening all across the country. Maybe they're not on YouTube, maybe they're happening on a bar stool right now, right? But there's rational conversations being had, and we don't get to hear that anymore. We're being told that we're supposed to just go at each
Right.
other, and I think that to be frank, I get really tired right now of being told who I am and how bad of a person I am just because I'm a white male that leans conservative. That is getting really really tiresome in corporate America for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, if I could show you some of the like literature that has been thrown my way from it, it is unbelievable. And so I don't know. I think that conservatives definitely, and I personally do feel like attacked from the left right now in the sense that like, yeah, look, we get it. Like slavery, terrible. Couldn't agree more. Like, but I think it's for me personally with all of that. I think it's wild how they want to talk about that whenever I think civil rights was 60 years ago. You and me would drink out of a different water fountain. That's absurd to me. I mean, that's where I think that's where the conversation should focus. And I
Mm.
think that there is a ton of growth that needs to happen. But I think that whenever people say things like right now we're the most socially divided we've ever been, that's just irresponsible, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
We had a
Because,
war, guys.
well, no, I mean, we literally, I have so many great friends that do not look like me. They're some of my best friends.
Yeah.
And so to say that we're so racially divided is just irresponsible, and it makes people dislike each other.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to start keeping these news channels accountable because they're brainwashing people into hatred, and it's wrong because hatred is not the way forward. And I think that what's frustrating, you know, left has coined the term progressive, right? And so now the term, like people always want to say that conservatism is just holding back on progress. I think that that's an unfair way of looking at politics, right? I think that progress forward is both social and economic. And while yes, there's going to be a progression from the left on what they want to push, I think that it's unfair to say. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Totally. The root of progressive is progress, and so it is suggesting that the opposite of you would be like a regressive movement. I will use the term because it is such an ingrained label, and like it helps, it's shorthand for my sets of beliefs a little bit, but I totally get what you're saying. And there's not tons, but there's definitely conservatives or libertarians that I know that would want just as radical of change, just not in the same direction, if that makes sense. So it's not that they just want to keep everything the same. They're against progress. They just want progress in a different direction and in different ways than I would.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. But anywho, man, I hope you have a good rest of your weekend. We'll catch up soon.
Perfect. Yeah, do this more often. You're awesome to talk to.
Awesome, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, bye.